I don't think I'm breaking any news here when I say that Notre Dame isn't going into the USC game with a ton of momentum. That being said, it is still a great opportunity for the Irish to bounce back and get a big win. But are they up for the challenge? That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Welcome to another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Wednesday, October 11th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018 and have been covering college football as a producer ever since, first for ESPN and now at Fox Sports. And today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 or more infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. In just a moment here, I'm going to be joined by my good friend Greg Flamming from Irish Sports Daily to preview Notre Dame's big game against their arch rival USC. Look, it hasn't been a great past week or so, maybe even a little bit more than that for Notre Dame fans. But as I said at the top, this really is a prime opportunity for Notre Dame to play spoiler, knock off their arch rival, spoil Caleb Williams' Heisman campaign, and really maybe even his career if this ends his national championship hopes. So Notre Dame has a ton to play for in this game. They're under a lot of pressure, but Greg and I cover every aspect of the game on both sides of the ball, what Notre Dame is going to have to do to win, and then at the end, we'll share our predictions. So let's talk to Greg. All right, it's USC week, so I felt it was only right to get another California resident who lives every day of their life in enemy territory on the podcast to talk about Notre Dame's upcoming game against their cross-country rival, and who better than Greg Flamming, who joins me now. And Greg, let's be honest about this situation. Vibes are not particularly high among the fan base right now, but the Irish have a golden opportunity on Saturday to play spoiler and bring some fun back into the season. So how would you describe your emotions about the game as we sit here late on a Tuesday night?
Good amount of trepidation, I think. I think it's my focus has been for the last I guess since the game, just trying to figure out what's going on with the team and trying to figure out like what is like real. Is like the first 4 games real, or the last few games on offense real? How much has been affected by like losing some wide receivers, the offensive line, like the turn in their play. Like I'm more focused on that than actually, I guess, thinking about the game, which is kind of a good thing, I guess. I'm more caught in the minutia of it. I'm not super worried about like, I haven't totally gotten to the point where it's like, oh, it's USC and this game has more implications than pretty much any game for me. So I haven't really focused on that as much, but as we get into tomorrow and Friday and the weekend, I'm start thinking about the game a lot more.
You said it. This game has more implications for you specifically than any other one. And I'm sure that has to do with living in California. So what does this rivalry mean to you? Because for me, it's gone through multiple evolutions throughout my life, but ever since I moved out here back in 2021, and then Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams took over the program, my deep-seated hatred for the Trojans has been restored.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. I became a Notre Dame fan for no good reason at all, other than watching them on TV. My dad loved UCLA basketball. My mom actually attended USC, which I didn't find out till I was like 12. But she was like not into sports at all. So I chose Notre Dame just off of my own thing. I wasn't pushed towards it or anything like that. So it's difficult, right? Like I had teachers who went to USC. I had one of my coaches went to USC, played football there. A couple of my coaches played football there, right? People from my high school went to USC. Like everything is kind of USC around where I grew up, and it's kind of a big deal. Interestingly, like I didn't know my friends were fans of USC football really at all, because when we were in high school, USC was bad. And so they didn't talk about it ever. And I was always talking about Notre Dame. And then once Pete Carroll era, that started getting going, like 02, 03, 04, 05, suddenly like they are watching all the games and they love USC. And it was like very annoying for me. So that's that's tough. I think now post Carroll era, it's like that was the height of just awfulness in terms of
Dude, I
like
cannot even imagine.
the hype, and everyone is just talking about them all the time. And it was like really, really bad then. Now, I think people have been kind of humbled by the Clay Helton, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin era. I think people were humbled by that. Now they're just very much of the like, hey, it's fun to be good again when they were bad for so long. So I think I get a lot more of that now. But there's still a little bit, there's still a little bit of that like annoyingness of just, it's a kind of an LA thing. And you kind of understand that, you've been here long enough, where it's like, it always just kind of works out for no good reason. It's like the Lakers, they're terrible. And it's like, oh, LeBron James is on the team, like that's very frustrating. And so when it happens for USC, it's like, oh, we've managed things terribly for like a decade. And then, oh, Lincoln Riley's our coach. And look at Caleb Williams is coming as well. Like, that's great, So that's very annoying. So yeah, my annoyance will definitely increase in the next couple of days.
Honestly, I can't even imagine what it was like living in LA or living in California during the Pete Carroll era. Because when I was a kid, there was a time when the mere thought of beating USC was impossible. Like when it happened in 2010, I was so stunned that it actually happened. And obviously at that point, USC had sort of fallen off. They weren't what they had been. But credit to you, man, for surviving that era and making it to today. But you're right, the fan base has certainly come back. So my first year out here was the last year of the Clay Helton era. So I got to see a lot of people come out of the woodwork the second year. I'm like, oh, you guys are USC fans.
Yep, that's happens.
Interesting. That's interesting. But as for the Notre Dame side of things, I don't think this is the biggest game of Marcus Freeman's head coaching career. I think that distinction goes to the Ohio State game from a few weeks ago, just given the stakes of that game at the time. We all know how that turned out, but considering everything that's happened in the time since, this feels like the most amount of pressure Marcus Freeman has been under since he took over the job at Notre Dame. So how much of an impact do you think the outcome of this game will have on his tenure here?
On his tenure, I mean, a fairly big amount, just because I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say, souring. I mean, a lot of people are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt right now. And that if they go 5-3, if they start out 5-3, like they were 5-3 last year. So you can't really say like they've made any sort of progress as a program. I think people gave him, I don't want to say a pass for last year, but just people understood like the quarterback situation wasn't ideal. Right. And people talked about that a lot. We talked about that a lot. And now you have Sam Hartman. Well, that obviously you don't have that excuse anymore. And so it's just, that's when it's going to start to be like, okay, we like the memes and we liked all the fun, Marcus Freeman looks good in his outfits and everything. But once you go 5-3, the heat gets turned up in a very different kind of way that we're all pretty much familiar with. But I think more than him is probably, this is without question the biggest game of Jared Parker's life, in my opinion. Now, granted, he's only been offensive coordinator for a short time, but this is a very big game for him. USC's defense has a very poor reputation. And if you can't get over on them, then who can you get over on? I think this is very important for him. Just from how they always say, like you kind of need a scalp. Like I think for him, it would just be, people are going to be like, okay, we're not going to throw Marcus Freeman away like that. Like we're not just going to be pushing for him, but people are going to want, some change, and that the call for Jared Parker at that point would just be very, very loud.
Yeah, it's almost like Marcus Freeman gets the benefit of the doubt with the offensive coordinator, given how public that search was and everything that happened there, that people are actually more willing to give Freeman a pass, because it was pretty clear to everyone watching that Jared Parker was not his first choice. or his second choice,
For sure.
or maybe even his third choice. It's just what he had to go with. Now, Parker is Freeman's guy, which definitely complicates things a little bit. But let's stay on Parker for a little bit because, as you mentioned, he's drawn a lot of criticism over the past 2 games, really cranked up after that just flat-out abysmal performance against Louisville. Some of that is on the players for not executing, but I think he's more at fault because it never felt like he was doing anything to play to the strengths of his players. You've been on this for a little bit now, and you've thrown out a lot of different solutions on Twitter and on your podcast as well. So give me the main things you'd like to see him do more of or implement against USC to have some more success.
Well, I mean, we've talked about, I've talked a ton about play action and that sort of thing. And I think it's not that play action is like some magic elixir that's going to fix all their problems. It's not that. It's more about giving your players some help in opening up the passing game, right? And I think that a lot of what Notre Dame is doing offensively is they are, especially in the passing game, is they're basically asking a wide receiving core that right now is just, I think everyone can kind of see, like they're not the greatest in terms of winning one-on-one matchups. Well, they're asking them to win one-on-one matchups. The first interception that Sam Hartman threw, right? That's a fade to the field on a basically a 50-50 ball. You're just like Rico Flores, go win a one-on-one matchup. Well, is that really maximizing him, right? Is that giving him the best chance to succeed in that situation? And he didn't, right? Like it didn't work out for him. And there haven't been, when has Notre Dame really won a 50-50 ball this year, right? Like that hasn't been it. You throw it on 1st and 10 on the opening drive of the game. And obviously it doesn't have to be an interception, but the chances of it being like we say 50-50 ball, but it probably isn't, right? It's probably more like 30-70. And opening play action that also basically stresses the defense, right? If you, especially running play action out of sets that you're also running the ball, like you're normally running the ball out of these sets, throw play action on that. Like give the defense something else to think about other than, hey, they're in this formation. They're always running in this formation. We are going to key on the run. And then you give them run. Well, then they don't have to think and they're not challenged mentally, right? You want to do that. I would love for them to place more emphasis on an RPO game, right? I've talked about that a ton. Where it's just if you don't like your box, then don't throw into it or don't run into it, right? This is prevalent along college football. This isn't a new thing, right? It's not something that teams just started doing. Notre Dame was doing this in 2017 with Chip Long, right? So I would love to see them implement that where you can take advantage of a matchup on the outside. Again, give your receiver a chance to win in a situation where they're keying on the run. So things like that, right? Get Jeremiah Love more involved. That would be great. He's had 24 carries in the last 3 games. Oh, I'm sorry. Against NC State, Ohio State, Duke, and Louisville, he has 24 carries for 162 yards. Okay. He's at 6.8 yards per carry. That needs to be, he needs to be getting double-digit carries there. Like that needs to increase. He's been their second best back all year, right? And the sample size is big enough now to where I think we can say that. Increase his role, give him more of a role, and go from there.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that Jeremiah Love is the most exciting offensive skill player when he has the ball in his hands. Like, I feel a different way when I see him carrying the ball. And Wojciak Esme is a better all-around back. I'm not saying that Love is better than him, but when he has the ball, I get excited. I'm moving up in my chair a little bit. I'm like, okay, because at any moment he could break one, and he just hasn't really had that many chances. But you're right. Notre Dame isn't getting anything going on the outside. You tweeted out how Sam Hartman has been a lot more effective throwing it in the middle of the field as opposed on the outside, especially between 10 and 20 yards. I do think a lot of that has to do with the receiver play, and they've just been able to find more open guys across the middle, especially against Ohio State. So I'm with you on all of that. I do think they're going to be able to have more success against USC. But it is kind of funny to me, and you know this too because you've been following USC for a long, not as a fan, obviously, but when people act surprised by the fact that Alex Grinch still has a job, he's literally playing the exact style that Lincoln Riley wants. Yes, they're going to give up a ton of yards, but they're going to sell out to create negatives and force turnovers. And so far this year, They've been actually pretty successful in doing that. They're second in the country in TFLs with 57, sixth in the country in sacks. They forced 8 turnovers. And considering what I've seen from Notre Dame's offense in recent weeks, I don't think it's a given that they're just going to go out there and figure out everything against this Trojans defense, especially considering how good they are at rushing the passer. How do you think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to hold up against this defense? Because that obviously goes a long way in determining how successful the entire operation is going to be.
That's the big question, right? I mean, look, if this game was taking place in week 5, we would just assume that Notre Dame was going to dominate that matchup, right? They should on paper, right? They're very good at the pass rush. They're not as good against the run. They're not as good up the middle, right? Their linebackers aren't as good up the middle, and they're not as good, filling on the run as they are rushing the passer, right? And we would just assume that was going to be something that Notre Dame could do. We assumed it last year when they went into that game. Now, granted, those circumstances are a little bit different at the end of the year, and it's on the road, and Notre Dame kind of always struggles on the road against USC. But it's hard to say, right? Like, we went into the Louisville game thinking they would have a significant matchup in the middle of the field, and that didn't prove out to be the situation at all. I don't think anyone knew going into Louisville that suddenly Billy Schrauth was going to be activated and Andrew Kristofic was going to get in the game for Zeke Correll at a different point. And Billy Schrauth was then going to play right guard, right? Like, so that is so much in flux. And that's the biggest question is, can Notre Dame basically get over on a defense that other teams have? Arizona just ran through them. Colorado ran through them. Right. They have been gotten by lesser offenses right now. It's hard to say. Like there's the negative. There's almost like a negative. You know how we say matchup proof? It's almost like matchup proof, but in a negative way. In that it doesn't matter how the defense is playing or how good the defense is and what the matchup could be on paper. It's that they have struggled. Right. We kind of waved it away against Ohio State and Duke because those are good, solid defenses. Louisville isn't of that caliber, and Louisville handled them up front. And so that's the thing where it's like, I can't really say how I think it's going to work because I was thinking Notre Dame should win this easily up front last week, and they very much didn't. And so that it's just kind of an unpredictable thing. Is Billy Schrauth going to start at guard, right? What is the Zeke Correll situation with Andrew Kristofic, right? Like that's just something that we don't know. It's not a good variable to have going into a big game like this, but unfortunately, that is what the case is.
It's so weird, especially considering our expectations for the unit going into this season. Yeah. Like you look back at the 2021 season, that's probably the worst offensive line Notre Dame has had in the past decade or probably since the Weiss era. And at least that group, after some reshuffling at the beginning of the year, some of that due to injuries, some of that was due to poor play, they eventually figured it out for the most part and finished the second half of the season strong. This is the opposite of that. They're getting worse as the season goes on, and it's really hard to wrap my head around. So I'm with you. I have no idea what to expect in that matchup because of what we saw against Louisville. Like I thought Louisville would be disruptive, but not completely dominate. We'll be right back with Greg to talk more about Notre Dame's game against USC. But first, I wanted to tell you about Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand, and it's simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on JaceMedical.com. That's JASE Medical.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. Let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. The headline there is Caleb Williams, and last year, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he flat out embarrassed the Notre Dame defense. Now, obviously, injuries in the secondary for Notre Dame didn't help, but he was running all over them, laughing at them while he did it. And I felt like Lincoln Riley just put Al Golden in a blender last year. But schematically, this season, what changes do you expect Al Golden to try and make to try and contain Caleb? Because there's no way you're stopping him.
Right. Well, I think it greatly helps that he has, by all accounts, he has his entire secondary available to him, right? Thomas Harper's coming back. Cam Hart's going to be playing in this game. Ben Morrison's there. I think Xavier Watts is playing better than he did at any point last year. And then you have the safeties, and they're ready to go. And the other part is, I think it very much helps that Marist, Leofau, and JD Bertrand are playing at a much higher level than they were last year in this matchup. And that's where it needs to happen. This is I know, but because of the way that USC plays, is that you think about the secondary matchup, but this is a front seven matchup for Notre Dame defensively. If they win up front, that is going to go a long way towards, slowing them down. And the thing that you have to do, and the biggest question is, because they couldn't do it last year, basically at any point, can you get Caleb Williams on the ground? You need to get him down. We've seen how many times in highlights through where it's like the defense wins the play. You get a good play call, the defense wins, and he's out there running around, and you can't get him on the ground, and he pulls something out, and he figures out a way to win. That's how he beat Arizona last week, right? Like that is the thing. Can you get him on the ground? And this is where Marist can play a huge role, right? The way that he played against Riley Leonard was very heartening because of the way that he was able to track him down, get him on the ground, keep him from, busting, a bunch of those quarterback scrambles, right? Like Riley Leonard's success came on design runs, right? Well, they don't do really design runs for Caleb Williams, right? Like he's a scrambler guy. Can Marist win that matchup? That is the key for him. Can they get something out of Jalen Sneed? Do they have something cooked up for him where he's going to be able to be a big factor in this game? And then, of course, the weather, right? Like that will play a big role as well for Notre Dame defensively. Will that hurt the ball handling for USC? There's a lot of ball handling, right? They run a lot of zone read. They run a lot of kind of read option where you're faking to the back. Caleb Williams can run, or he can flip it out to wide receiver. It's almost like a triple option action. You're just throwing it instead of pitching it backwards. But that's the key for Notre Dame. Up front, must win up front. USC makes you play with light boxes. You have to win in those light boxes. If you don't win in those, you almost have no chance.
Yeah, I totally agree. And looking at it right now, I thought Arizona was able to get him on the ground a lot. I just checked. They had 4 sacks on Caleb Williams. If Notre Dame can't get to 4 sacks, and look, I think Arizona is actually a better team than people are giving them credit for. They hung tough with Washington. Now that's starting to look like less of a fluke. Still, though, it's Arizona. Notre Dame should be able to get Caleb Williams on the ground when they do get in the backfield. And we've seen so far this season that their offensive line is gettable. But when I look at this USC offense, they've got probably the deepest wide receiver room in all of college football. They might not have the top end guys that Ohio State has, but they're like 8 or 9 deep. Like it's crazy. But their running back, Marshawn Lloyd, the transfer from South Carolina, he's been terrific this year, averaging 7.7 yards per carry. And they still have Austin Jones, by the way, who ran for 154 yards on Notre Dame last year. How do you think Notre Dame is going to hold up against their run game this year? Because last year it felt like for as much as Caleb Williams sort of dominated the headlines and all that, he made some unbelievable plays. The real twist of the knife came from USC's run game because Notre Dame just could not stop them, especially in the red zone. They could not get off the field because USC was winning in the early downs with their run game.
So the good news is Howard Cross is playing at a level that we're talking like Sheldon Day, like Trevor Laws type, like Trevor Laws 07 type of performance, right? So he's playing as well as he ever has. Riley Mills had a strong game again.
Yeah, he had a good game against Louisville.
Yeah, he had a very good game against Louisville. He had a very good game against Duke as well. So he's trending in the right direction there. Get Gabriel Rubio back, which also will help greatly. And again, it's just Javante Jean-Baptiste. Like it's going to be a big game for him, right? It's a big game for Jordan Patelho, big game for Joshua Burnham and guys coming off the edge. Like that's very important for them. And it's going to be a big game for Thomas Harper as well. Just like he's also in the run game, and he's going to be activated in that because they're going to be a nickel a ton. But I would say Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Gabe Rubio, Jason Anye. those are the keys to everything. Like the running game, like I said, light boxes have to win the matchup with their guards and their center. Have to. It is the key to the game. That is what to watch for. If Notre Dame can control their running game, that goes a long way to slowing down that team, because then, you don't have to commit numbers, right? You don't have to drop safeties or anything like that. They can just worry about the back, and that sets up everything else for the defense.
Yeah, this feels like a useful game for Jack Kaiser to get a little bit more action as well. But whenever Notre Dame is in nickel, he's rarely out there. So we'll see if Notre Dame is able to find a way to utilize him. But you did mention it, and I wasn't going to ask about it, but you know what? Let's talk about it. How much of an impact do you think the weather's going to have? Because I just looked up at the forecast. It says it's going to be a high of 56 with a 65% chance of rain, a.k.a. a typical fall day in South Bend. But I kind of go back and forth on like, oh, this definitely benefits Notre Dame, or maybe it doesn't, because obviously it's going to be more difficult for Caleb Williams to pass. But I just don't know on a turf field, if it's not that windy, if it's going to have that much of an impact. But I could be wrong.
So I've seen the wind around like 25 gust, and then between 10 and 15 miles an hour, just kind of steady, which if that's the case, then whatever wetness, that is more important than just it being wet. So if it's windy like that, that's a big deal. And the wetness to me is just like, it's more of a ball handling issue for them. Notre Dame doesn't do a ton of ball handling. USC does a ton, right? They do a lot, right? That is a major part of their offense. Lincoln Riley loves to kind of hide the ball from the defense and that sort of thing. So I think that could be a big factor in terms of the wetness. But I mean, look, Caleb Williams has a very strong arm. He can cut through the wind, but it's a little bit of a variable there. The weather is something to monitor throughout kind of the week, because obviously in the Midwest, things can change very quickly, right? They can change. Even in the South, right? Like the NC State game, there was going to be no rain during the game. And then even like an hour before the game, it's like, oh no, the rain's going to go away. It's not going to be around. And then during the game, it's like, nope, the wind shifted and here comes the rain and lightning, and you got to wait for 2 hours, right? So things can change very quickly there, and you just kind of have to monitor that. But I would say wind, bigger factor, rain, a factor in the ball handling, maybe less so than just the actual passing game.
Greg and I still have more to get to about the USC game, but I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. And how does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will do more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. PrizePicks adds a ton of excitement to the sports viewing experience because you can watch your progress update in real time, win up to 25 times your entry amount, and cash out your winnings with quick scoring, settling, and withdrawals. I've been playing PrizePicks recently, and I have no idea why I waited so long. And what I love about it is that you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals and sharks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege, code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports, made easy. Okay, last one before we get to some predictions. And it's funny because, like, normally I wouldn't ask about special teams, but when you're going up against a Lincoln Riley team who he just has complete, utter indifference about that aspect of the ball until Zachariah Branch came to USC, and now all of a sudden I'm looking at that whole thing a little bit differently. But then again, last week, USC did give up a blocked field goal on the game-winning attempt in regulation, so clearly they have some flaws there as well. Right now, we don't know if Zachariah Branch is going to play. He's missed the last 2 games, but when he's out there, man, he looks like Tyreek Hill in college again. So are you expecting any trickery, or how big of an impact do you think special teams is going to have in this game? Because last year, USC was able to pretty much eradicate Notre Dame's punt block unit by making Caleb Williams the punter. And of course, he did a pretty effective job at it, which annoyed me even more.
Should Notre Dame, I guess this is kind of a prediction. Like, should Notre Dame get to a punt, like an actual punt, and not Caleb Williams doing that, pooch punt thing? I think Notre Dame blocks a punt this week. That's what I think will happen. I think they've been close. Right, I think they want to go after it. And I think that it's like, might as well, because Chris Tyree doesn't want to catch it and return it. So, So I think that's the thing that can happen. I don't want to see any of this. Like, well, so here's the thing, right? Here's the other part with the wind. If you're kicking against the wind and you can't kick it through the end zone, I don't want Zachariah Branch getting anywhere near the ball, right? If you're kicking with the wind, then just boom it. Like, don't mess around with like, oh, we're gonna angle the kick and we're gonna like pin them deep. No. Get it out of there. Don't let them return the ball. Right? Have a plan for that. Like, kick it short. I don't care. Like, just don't give him a chance to beat you like that. But yeah, my prediction is if Notre Dame actually gets a chance to go after a punt, I think they're going to get one this week.
All right. It's documented. I wrote it down. Greg said we're going to block a punt. And hell, maybe Sam Hartman can pooch punt. If that's what it takes to avoid giving the ball to Zachariah Branch, I will take it. But as we get into predictions here, I have not brought it up yet. I was floored when I saw that Notre Dame was favored. And now the line is up to 2.5 on FanDuel. And look, I know USC has struggled defensively, but still, they're undefeated. They've got Caleb Williams. I really, at this point, I've been trying to get myself ready to say that Notre Dame is going to win. Frankly, I'm not there yet. But give me your predictions. Give me a score. What do you think is going to happen in this game? And then we'll compare.
I can't pick Notre Dame to win, unfortunately. They're not playing well enough. There's just no real evidence to suggest that they're suddenly going to turn it around. I know USC's defense isn't as good as it's been. I think Notre Dame's defense can play well, but I just don't see them being able to pull out this game, unfortunately. I'm going to go 34-27 USC. I've been fooled two times too many. And I gotta go with the team. I don't understand the line. Maybe it's weather related. I don't know. And maybe I'm just too close to the situation. I don't know, but I just, I don't see it. I think USC wins this game.
You bring up a good point. Maybe we're too close to it because the way that we hyper analyze everything that Notre Dame does, we could do the same with USC if we were that invested and we're watching it so closely. But unfortunately, I'm with you. I don't think Notre Dame is going to be able to do it. And I hope I'm wrong. But right now, I'm thinking 41-31, USC wins. I think that Notre Dame's defense is going to do their best. But, I mean, I just have not seen any defense be able to stop Caleb Williams and that offense for a full 60 minutes. I mean, Arizona slowed them down early, and then that 17-0 lead went away like that. Like, it was gone in a second. And it seems like no matter what the defense does for USC, every time Caleb Williams comes back out on the field, especially when it's late in the game, I just assume he's going to score. So, look, we're ending it on a sour note there. We're both like the Trojans right now to win this game. Maybe as time goes by, I'll get a little bit more delusional and I'll be ready to flip my pick. But that's how I'm feeling right now. But, Greg, it's getting late. I appreciate the time, man. So please take this opportunity to plug everything you've got going on because I know it's a lot.
Well, the main thing is Hit and Hustle on YouTube for Irish Sports Daily. Go to our YouTube channel. Hit and Hustle's there. We're doing live shows. Tuesday and Thursday, post-game show is on right after the game, and then I do a morning after recap show. Sundays 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific time. I've got a Single High podcast for uhnd.com with Frank Viktovich. And we also have me and my friend, we've done a Untitled Notre Dame USC football podcast for the last 6 or 7 years. I mean, that's the one that I've been doing for the longest. So I like to keep it up. It's one of my best friends, and we talk about it, and that comes out about once a week. We have 2 this week because it's the rivalry week. So that's what we got going on.
All right, man. Well, take care. Enjoy the game on Saturday. I'm sure I'm going to be texting you during it, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more enjoyable than the past couple weeks. For sure.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Love to do it.
All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. For the everyday listeners out there, we got a lot more USC preview content the rest of the way. Plus, I'm going to have another guest on tomorrow to talk about where Notre Dame is at right now, how they can improve, and what all of this means for Marcus Freeman and his tenure. Remember, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast and follow us on social media. Twitter's at Locked On Irish. Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal Twitter account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. Same time, same place tomorrow. I'll see you then.